What's up, guys? This is Pete, aka Carroters, and welcome back to the Carrot Poker podcast. I have my friend and student Jack with me today. What's going on, man?
Hey, man, how's it going?
It's going pretty well. I love how we always pretend that we haven't just been talking for the last 10 minutes.
I was thinking the same exact thing. Wow.
It's funny.
This is so phony.
It is really, really phony, yeah, but it's just the way it's done in the podcast industry, as you know. So, we're back for 100 Hands promotion. Selflessly talking about 100 Hands today, which we're going to continue along the same vein as last time and actually go through a couple of hands. So I understand that you've been in your kind of man cave bunker thing, puzzling over which two numbers to give me between 1 and 100 for the last week, right?
I put a lot of effort into this. It took me about 3 weeks at best to sort out what random numbers I wanted to choose. There are so many ways of going about it. I could use dice. I could use 20-sided dice and keep rolling them and narrow them down. I could use an RNG, but that was a pretty lazy way to go about it.
Yeah.
And then I ended up deciding on 17 and 56. Right. And there was a lot of good contenders in the numbers.
Yeah.
I really like 99 because who picks 99? No one ever goes like top heavy or really low. Like no one's going to send 1, no one's going to send 100, no one's going to send 99. But I wanted to get into the thick of it. So I just want to give a shout out to 67.
Yep.
Silver medalist, you did well. But you just didn't cut it, so better luck the next time.
Surely it should be like a bronze medalist since there were 2 that actually made the cut.
Yeah,
just to be a dick, I just feel like pointing that out.
Yeah, you're right. Well, then if that's the case, then 17 got silver and 56 got gold based off absolutely nothing but how I feel.
That's good. So it's almost random then. Not random fully like a computer would have it, but about as random as a human can get to being random.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so basically I instructed you to give me one. You were bound by one limitation that probably made this choice even more difficult, which was that one of the numbers has to be odd and the other one has to be even. The reason for that is that, as I said in my last introductory podcast and the one before that, 100 Hands is a book of 2 different formats. 50 of the hands are green and they are odd numbers and they are hands played by the student, and these are just different students. I don't think there's any 2 played by the same guy. Well, there probably are a few played by the same guy, but they're all scattered out. They're anonymous. They're from my forum, and therefore when the reader's going through them, he or she is encouraged to be very critical and be like, what the fuck is this fish doing? This is terrible, blah, blah, blah. I've ripped them apart. Right. That's absolutely fine. And when I'm going through them, in the book, I'm generally quite polite, but at some points I find myself writing like, summary to the student, I hope you were fucking joking, posting it. Oh no, I can't write that. Like, delete. So it's like that, I want the reader to feel like they can tear the hand apart. Like, I want them to feel like, oh, I get to be the coach here, I get to be the teacher here, and I get to like mock this guy's play, or not mock it, but maybe like give constructive criticism. That's cool.
Can I just interject with my perception and curiosity of what I was supposed to do with one of them?
Yeah.
So you gave me one of the hand histories, and we're going to go over it, obviously.
Yeah.
But the hand history ends, and there's no question at the end. And I finished it, I'm like, what the fuck are you asking me? But I didn't agree with everything in the hand history. So I was like, what the fuck is this shit? Like, I didn't know what to do with it. And there was no explanation necessarily. I thought that they were just going to have a point in the hand where it stops. This is what would you do here? Yeah. But one of the hands just ends with and I'm like, wait, what? And so I emailed you, and I was like, what am I? I was like, I worked my way through how to word this. Like, maybe he said it, I just ignored it. I was like, I don't know what he wants from me. But yeah, so a hand ends, and then later on you replied to my email, and you said, oh, that's one that a student played, and feel free to basically tear it apart. Yeah. I was like, oh, that makes total sense, because I didn't think that was right. And I was like, what do I know?
You're just too afraid to say, though, because I was your coach. You were like, this guy's played this hand abysmally, and I have to, for his ego and so his book sells, I have to, come on and pretend that I agree with all these horrible plays.
What a freaking Ponzi scheme, man, for coaching. Right? If you did that. And you know what I feared is that I was like, are these current students? Because, imagine you post this, the podcast comes out. I was like, what if I insult this person? And they're they drop you, they shit on you, and then they're like, there's your pie.
Yeah, the great thing about the poker community is that there's just so few people actually like that are going to actually be offended in any way. I've just had such a good time, on a serious note, over the last 5 to 7 years, I guess, whatever the hell it is, coaching people, because I've just had 2 students that I disliked over that time of coaching hundreds of guys, you know what I mean? So it's just you're generally okay. I won't go telling you the stories about the students who have upset me in the past, even though some of them are quite hilarious because they might be listening and they might be offended and they might like shit on me, as you say. But yeah, most guys are fine. It's going to happen, right?
Maybe for another time.
Yeah, at some point, like, I'm going to have to tell some of these stories because they're funny, but I'll make up aliases and stuff like that when I do. But yeah, generally, everyone's just boringly nice in poker. Like, you just never get anyone that, like, argues with you, or they're too nice almost. You could be like, you should really fold aces pre, like, to balance your range. They'd be like, okay, yeah, okay, good. They'd, like, take notes. But no, people are nice, but yeah, like, let's move on anyway before we get too off topic. So, we've got these two hands to talk about. I guess what we'll do is we'll start off in chronological. If I get the chance, I might actually quote some, excuse my phone obnoxiously telling me I have an email there. I might actually quote some stuff from the book and hope that I don't quote a sentence that's got a typo in it since it's not actually edited fully yet. I got a hell of a lot of emails in the Grinders Manual like, man, you wrote shirt term instead of short term. I got like 12 emails on that one typo. So I'm going to be like really careful not to make that one this time.
You got free editors, man.
Yeah, it's true. It's good. You can't complain really, can you? So, hand 17. That's so funny. Do you know what the title of this hand is in the book? I'll tell you. Because making you guess like 4 words. Making you guess 4 words out of the English language is a bit unfair. This hand is called an educational train wreck.
Okay, this is the hand that looks like,
So don't worry about offending my students. I've already done it. It's okay.
All right, fair enough. I wish you just sent me the names and I would just interpret that alone without even seeing the hand histories.
Then I'd give you a clue as to where the analysis was going to go, and I can't have that. I have to have you go into it blind, see how well you really do. So let's open this hand then. Where is it gone? It's just disappeared. Hand 17. So why don't you start talking everyone through while I actually sort my shit out here, like what happens in this hand?
Alright, so hand 17 is a hand that's the one I was speaking about earlier that's played through. It's a hand where we play, it's folded to us in the small blind, and we look down at ace of clubs, 7 of spades, ace 7 offsuit. We open 2.5x in the small blind, which seems fine, and we're playing against an unknown. We have about 10 hands on the player. His stats are 20-10, DPIP 20, PFR 10. And he calls. The flop comes ace of spades, 9 of spades, 3 of spades. So we flop top pair with a flush draw because we have the 7 of spades.
Cool. So we have like this really, really bad. We've opened blind versus blind, just to summarize. We've been flattered by a relative unknown and we've flopped top pair on monotone ace 9-3 with a really bad 7 high draw and our top pair. Okay, so far so good, I guess. Yeah.
Right.
So it's your point. So you've already critiqued the pre-flop and you said it's fine. I think I agree with that. So let's have you critique Hero's play on the flop then.
So I want to preface with, I don't know what I'm doing. I want to feign some humility and say I'm getting coached by Peter, so I don't know everything. All right.
No. You're getting coached by me, therefore you do know everything. You've got to.
Fair enough. All right. So here's what I accidentally wrote fish when I was talking about the student. I was like fish stick. When I wrote it out, I sort of got. And I was like, "Why are you writing this? You're such an asshole." All right. So the player, the student, whoever you are, I'm sorry. In this situation, the student perceives this situation as a spot to range bet. Because they bet half pot out of position, which I assume they're range betting. They bet half pot.
That's generous, to assume that your opponent's, isn't your opponent, to say that, villain is trying to range bet. Normally when people give me that kind of analysis on a hand for someone who's not in my community, when it's just a player in the pool, how do you think I react to that if a student goes, villain is probably range betting?
That the guy just probably, click small and just half pot and just
he just clicks buttons, right? That's what I normally think. But maybe the student is doing that here. So if the student is range betting, do you agree or disagree with that choice and why?
I want to start off by saying I assumed it was range betting because it was your student. But prior to that, I was like, oh, then I'm not sure about this. Sure. I think that range betting here is wrong. I think that this is board texture that we should be polarized on.
Yep. So just to clarify what that means,
well, I think that he shouldn't take his whole entire range. He's open in a small blind here on this texture, heads up against this passive fish.
Yep.
and fire his whole range into this passive fish.
Yeah.
What seems to be a passive fish. I don't think that that's an ideal thing to do. I think that he should be value betting some hands. I think that he should be bluffing a lot of hands. He has a really wide range here. He's probably like 45, 50% of hands here.
Maybe more if he's overstealing pre against this guy. Yeah.
For sure. And so within that grouping, I don't think we want to be range betting that 60% hoard into this texture. It doesn't seem like a good idea. I don't think we're going to elicit that much fold equity against this P-fish necessarily. And also, I think that we can utilize the check call range here against this fish.
Yeah, definitely. I think we have a lot of hands that kind of hate betting, like Ace of Clubs, Seven of Spades, for example, which is the hand we actually have.
Exactly, it's the hand that I didn't like betting, and I thought I think maybe what the student and the person in this example might be thinking, with as far as what quality their hand is, oh, I have an ace, but not just I have an ace, I have a flush draw as well, so value bets because 7 isn't that bad of a kicker because of how wide my range is, all things considered.
Yeah, or even some people even think I have good hand, like ace, top pair plus a flush draw is a big hand, blind versus blind, therefore I'm going to value bet. And that kind of gets wrong both the definition of a value bet and the other problem is obviously, like you said, it doesn't relate to their overall strategy of like, what are you then check calling? Just before we get to that though, let me bring it back slightly. How do we decide then, like, when we should range bet and when we shouldn't range bet? Like, what's the defining factor?
It's probably going to be a spot where we have a discernible range advantage.
Okay, good. So range advantage, right? So on this board here, when it's all spades, you can see how the nut advantage slides away from hero and kind of gets split equally between both players, right?
Absolutely.
Do you want to explain that for the listeners, how that works?
So we're opening, right? 60% here, or even more against the P-fish, right? And so in that regard, we do expect P-fish maybe to, well, it's because we're over stealing, we're expecting to elicit some folds at a cheap price, right?
Yeah.
When the P-fish does decide to call, he's only played 2 hands out of the last 10, right? The hands that he's cold cocking, he's not correctly defending his big blind wide enough.
Probably not.
Because our profit is coming from the fact that we're over stealing, so we're being exploitative in regards to him not defending enough at a frequency that would make it so we would not profit from this. So make it break even. We have a plus EV steal on our hands here. So when we have a plus EV steal on our hands, and then he goes and defends, well, he's not defending with as wide a range as the average pair. So when he shows up to this flop, he's going to have a bit of range advantage when we're playing 60% of hands.
And let's talk about the texture in particular, which is where normally, right, let's say he was, I guess I was thinking about it more from the point of view that villain is unknown. Like, he has 2010, he is probably a passive fish, like you say, but he may not be. And if we were going to treat him as an unknown for now, he could be defending enough, but this is not as good a flop for us as something like Ace 5-5 Rainbow. And I guess the point there is that the nuts on Ace 5-5 Rainbow is like Ace King, Ace Queen, okay, 5x, etc. Take Ace 5 Deuce Rainbow then, where the nuts is like literally Ace King and Ace Queen. That's the most combinatorically likely nutted strong hand. On this board, the nuts is a flush because it's monotone. And flushes are spread fairly equally in both players' ranges and almost completely equally when the Ace of Spades is actually one of the cards that's on board.
Yes.
So flopping like Jack 8 of Spades is something that both players can do with like the same frequency if they're defending enough. And what that does is it splits the nut advantage equally, and it means that hero is out of position without that much of an equity edge. He'll have some equity edge, but it won't be much at all on this kind of texture, and is therefore forced to create a checking range strategically, right? So the student betting here is a violation of the balance point of view, like you were saying, because he's chosen to range bet when he should have a checking range due to those advantages we've just talked about. And secondly, it's probably exploitatively bad because we're betting a hand that plays very well as a check call, hates to get raised off its equity. If villain raises a set or something, it's just terrible that we didn't just check call the flop and draw to the 7 high flush. Not that we'd do that if we knew he had a set, but you know, you get the picture, right? There's a lot of good worlds when we check call. And so in a vacuum, exploitatively speaking, it's not really a hand that wants to value bet. Because the value bet, you know, if you're going to be polarized, you want to start building a big pot with hands that are actually like very far ahead or don't really like checking or, you know, want a big huge pot. This hand doesn't. It wants to catch bluffs because the hands that this does well, like best against on the flop, are bluffs from villain, right? They're like hands like just
Right.
like 6-5 that he just randomly decides to bet or something like that. So check calling is great, for sure.
It also in the regards to two things. One is when we want to range bet, it's pretty discernible that we want to do that when we have range advantage and nut advantage, and those have big question marks over them. But on top of that, I would want to ask everyone: is A7 a hand where you want to go bet, and no matter any river that falls, do you feel really confident? I'm just going to triple barrel for value. You know,
I don't feel comfortable triple barreling on like any river at all. Actually, I would go one
yeah.
farther,
So
maybe
it's
an
like,
ace.
why would you?
Or 7-7 or something like that run out,
Yeah.
but like on most run outs, I'm definitely checking at some point, so that then raises the question. And I will never say begs the question, by the way, because I did a philosophy degree, and in philosophy it means something completely different to say begs the question, so I'd like just avoid that little trap there. But it raises the question of, like, you know, what was I even saying before I got on that tangent? Like, yeah, what are we, like, why do we want to prolong our checking? Like, we need to protect our checking range now, so why would we not just want to check right away if we're going to have to make
Right.
that check at some point anyway? So that's really the question that it raises, and the answer to that is we wouldn't. We just want to check right away with a lot of hands because we have to, and this is like the nut checking hand. When I say nut, I don't mean like strongest, I mean the most suitable, like it fits the job perfectly, it's perfect for the
Right.
role, etc. We want to check this, basically. This is just a perfect fit. Ace Jack just fits here into a checking range. Like the checking range was built. Ace 7 with the 7 of spades fits into this range like it was built for this hand, basically.
Absolutely. It naturally feels right that when you look at it, you're like, oh, I'm just going to check call here.
Yep.
And when something feels kind of right, and then you have some theory behind you, there's a reason why it feels right. And as soon as I saw it, I was like, this doesn't seem right. So then I had to break down why I thought this didn't seem right.
Yeah, when you've got a relatively like decent level of experience, like we both have in poker, I think you get to the point where you can say, intuitively, I know this is a check call, and then when someone asks you to justify it, you can then do that as a separate activity, but you don't have to do that in game, because subconsciously you understand that it's right to check call, and that's not just emotion
Right.
or a whim, that's actually just subconscious competence building over the years that you've been studying the game, I think, more than anything.
Now that we've discerned that, like, we want to check call here, do we keep going forward with what transpires with the compounding mistakes?
Yes, absolutely. You say,
Okay.
as played, fold, as played, fold, as played, fold, like when you go through a
Yeah.
hand, like with the student
Okay.
just messes up every street. Let me see if I can quote something from the book just before we move on about the flop. So I've said, I hope you found Hero's flop line problematic, which you did, so kudos to you. This is close to the most suitable hand in Hero's range to check. It has not only mediocre showdown value that craves a smaller pot, but also a flush draw that makes any turn at least reasonable for Hero when he check calls a flop or when the flop checks through. So there's then a bunch more detail about, from a balancing perspective, how do we organise our range and blah 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 on the flop. But I'm just giving you guys tasters for now. Can't give you the full book as an audiobook over the podcast, so you wouldn't buy it. So I guess we'll have to move on. So next point then is going to be what happens on the turn. What do you think about that?
Okay, so what the player is thinking here is they have range bet on the flop, or at least I think that's what they think. They've range bet on the flop, and they find themselves on the turn, and they feel a little more, I think, confident about their hand, its value. So the turn ends up bricking. It's a where is it here? The turn is an 8 of hearts, so the board is now ace high monotone, and the turn is an 8, so now you have an 8-9 to a straight, which
So
I think is relatively irrelevant.
Ace 9 3 8 with 3 spades
Yeah.
and a heart. Yeah, okay, cool.
So on the turn, the pot is now 10 point something big blinds,
Mhm.
and Hero decides to value bet. They fire a 7 big blind bet out of position here, which makes me think that they range bet flop, and then when they got to the turn, they said, I'm going to take a group of hands and value bet and a group of hands and bluff, or at least I hope they're thinking this, and they're going to fire a bigger size bet because they don't fire their whole entire range here.
Right, but A7 is kind of a merge, right? Like A7 is the kind of hand you would bet when you're not just betting polarized, like when you're trying to merge up your range, bet with a higher frequency, protect more equity,
Right.
make it harder for villain to realize equity, etc., etc. And this doesn't look like a good spot to merge in because we don't have an advantage. The turn is like really a brick for our range. We don't have that many 8s that we're opening pre, or pocket 8s is a very tiny amount of our range. So it seems to me like here we wouldn't really want to merge. We'd want to bet for a bigger sizing, which is what Hero's done. But then that indicates that he should be polarized, not merged. So it seems a little bit backwards, right?
Absolutely. It goes back to the first thing on the flop, but I mean that's natural that would happen as we're at this point in the hand.
Yeah.
So Hero decides to fire a 7 big blind bet into a 10 big blind pot with what I think he perceives to be a very strong hand in this exact situation. The unknown and or passive fish raises him in position, which for all intents and purposes is a complete disaster. Like, that's horrendous. What is this? We don't have enough reads to think this guy's just spazzing out. Like, why? This is terrible. For what we know about this guy, this is like you don't even need a time bank. So, but apparently our hero thinks otherwise because he's time bank probably and calls. Let me just break down the call and the sizing of the situation. So we bet 7 big blinds into 10 big blinds. Our opponent raises to where's the sizing here? Shoot. I think it's 16.5. I know that his required fold equity in this situation is 48.9%. I think he makes it 16.5 big blinds. And so then our minimum defense frequency is 51.1%. So what I think Hero might be thinking here is I have polarized. This is in the value side of my polarization. And I have a flush draw. So I can call. I'll fold out the bluffs. And I'll call with the value side of my bets.
You're being so generous here with these thought processes.
So generous.
Like you're actually trying to pick the most reasonable, intelligent player that for some reason just made a small mistake and ended up making a horrible play. I think more likely, like I have students of all levels, this is probably just someone that's not really aware of relative hand strengths here or has mental game issues or whatever. At least we're only offending like 1/130th of our community right now when I say this. So, and he may not even know this hand is his, may have forgotten. So, but like you're being very kind, but I agree. Like
I'm being pretty nice, honestly.
I think the range, like you said.
Yo, Jack, like maybe take it down a notch.
Yeah, maybe just tear this guy apart a little bit more just for the entertainment.
Alright, this is super dumb. What are you doing, kid? You rage bet and then you polarize and you bet 8-7. Like that's what you want to do with your life, with your rage.
I know, right?
And the guy raises, and then I went for a second. I thought he was just gonna 3-bet. Like I'm going for it, but he didn't. He did a 3-bet at least.
Right, but he's called the turn raise. And I didn't even go into detail in 100 hands, right? 100 hands doesn't even talk about Hero's MDF, which is minimum defense frequency, which is to reverse, like you mentioned, which is to reverse the spot, look at it from Villain's point of view, pretend that Villain is playing optimally, and then try to counter that strategy by playing optimally and neutralize Villain's strategy, right? That is something I just didn't even do because I thought at this point in the hand with this player type breed thus far, it's probably just completely unnecessary, and this is just going to be a super strong range like all the time. So I'll give you a quote at this point. So I've said, Villain does not seem like an aggressive player, and we're in a game where the population does not bluff raise enough on the turn, because the stakes of this are what? What's the stakes?
You know what? To be honest, the other hand has stakes. I don't think this one had stakes. It was written in big.
Oh no, it does. It has 10 and L at the top, right? So it's a 10 and L zoom hand. So it's not.
Oh my god, this is a nightmare.
Yeah, so this is even worse in a tight pool where they're not going to be bluffing turn all that much. So then I've said, this is a fold. It's sad that we squandered our hand's merit versus Villain's range by investing our money in the wrong way on the flop, but that does not justify our call now. All post-flop decisions have thus far been a disaster. But the analysis does not stop there. Like, it's like, we're not done with you yet. We're going to, like...
You get so much worse.
We're just going to eat away at this corpse a little bit more right now that we've killed the student's line. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to... Alright, so the hero calls because I has top pairs and I has flush draw. So, sure, fine. There's no plan, obviously. There's no implied odds here. I don't know, like, what he's thinking. But, obviously... we've ruled out thinking at this point in the hand. So we call.
Right.
Seems fine. The river comes to spade, lo and behold, and for all intents and purposes, it's a pretty good spade. It's a queen of spades. It's one of the higher spades, which makes our spade a little better.
Yeah, it's harder for Villain to have the flush, right? When the queen of spades comes, it's one of the main drawing spades in Villain's range are already made flushes. Yep, good point.
Yeah. So then our hero feels like I can't check call here because of course the P-Fish isn't gonna like bluff into us because of course the P-Fish wasn't bluffing on the turn, but we haven't figured that out by now. So we decide to what I hope is bet fold, and then our hero bets a quarter pot. And then the hand just ends, and I immediately sent you an email. I was like, what do you want me to do with this?
Yeah, you're like, Characters is a terrible player. Don't buy this book. He's played a hand like
I was
shit.
Like, did you play this? Is there something I don't know?
Yeah, you actually literally picked like the worst played hand in this entire book when you said 17. Like, it's really impressive that you managed to do that.
And this was a gold medal, man.
This was well done, yeah. So see, it pays to think about your random number of generators and stuff like that, right? It obviously pays to be in the tank for a week there. So yeah, like this is just really, really weird. Like the lead on the river, I can see some kind of merit. Like maybe the passive fish is now, if he is a passive fish, is now like, oh no, like my 6-5 of spades is bad, but I have to cry and call this 10. I think this is like not the worst. This is not like the worst river line that anyone could ever take. I don't actually hate it.
Right. As played.
I think it's the best played street post flop actually.
Right.
And it's weird. I'm not saying it's well played, but I think it's the best played street post flop. I guess like what have I said here? Like based on this, so I've said if you were how did you rate Hero's Riverline as played? If you were quick to denounce it as spew that is only like to get called by better hands, I don't blame you. I hate this line against the average reg because it's obviously like ridiculously face up and unbalanced and exploitative, and villain is nutted still, right? So it's horrendous against the average reg. However, in poor old Hero's defense, feeling a bit bad for Hero now because it's literally the most battering a student has got in the entire book was this hand that you picked, right? So I'm even starting to feel bad as I'm slogging away at my keyboard, mundanely writing this on like a rainy Tuesday afternoon. I'm even feeling a pang of remorse. So I must have been like brutal in my head. I probably deleted all the worst things I said, but you know, I must be feeling bad at this point. So, and then I've said, there are two ways one could argue that this is okay. First way, villain is unknown 2010, and these stats will often turn out to represent the tighter, more passive variety of fish, like you say. While this makes Hero's turn play even worse, it could be an argument for the river bet having merit. Such a villain will rarely bluff raise the river, as this would require that he takes a set or two pair and decides to turn it into a bluff and make Hero fold exactly a weak flush, never happening. Moreover, I quote, a weak player may even call this bet with two pair or a set, unaware that Hero will literally never ever have a worse hand. The second reason that I said here, the other realm in which this is fine is against someone balanced or very good, and only if we balance it properly. The reason that this sizing equates to a reasonable river line is twofold. Firstly, we're facing a very uncapped range, which makes having large sizing undesirable. Like, we don't want to lead out like completely massive against uncapped ranges. There's a big downside to that, strategically. And secondly, I quote, Hero should have almost no air now at all, given the way the hand played out. This means that his sizing, when he holds a value hand like King of Spades, King X, which undoubtedly does not want to lead, needs to be smaller. Like, if we have an airless range, we need to lead smaller, right, as a bluff, right, as a value bet, just with our range. So there's a really advanced balance reason for why this might be able to form part of a coherent strategy, and there's also like a vacuum reason against a passive fish is why this might be an okay line. I think the river line is actually all right. What did you think? Did you have a better kind of idea of an alternative on the river?
All right, I'll read you my quote of what I said, but I do want to say how it's funny how you're like, man, you're really being generous with this guy on the flop. Man, you're really being generous, guy, on the turn. And then on the river, it's just like, no, it's great. Seems fine. That's played. So what I said is, like I said before, we get probably one of the best spades available in the deck. Check calling seems abysmal for the same reasons that bet calling was to me on the turn.
Exactly.
But since we got here this way, thin bet fold seems fine.
Yep. So we agreed with the river line being okay, which is good. We're on the same page there for that whole hand. Very good analysis. I'm really happy with like how you approached that as my student. Basically agreed with mostly what I said in here. Obviously, if you read the 100 hands analysis, say you were reading through the book and that was what you did, you wrote out a response, which is what I encourage my readers to do if they want to get the most out of this book. Just do that 100 times. You'll be such a better player afterwards. If you've done that, then you check up your analysis with my essay and you read my essay, and it's still near the start of the book when I was writing like really thorough essays before I'd already like covered a lot of the theory I wanted to cover. So I was still covering loads of theory. So I've written like loads about this hand, and you could then say, okay, good, I was right. But I also learned like 10 other things there that were like side points to like what I said, and that's like the idea that even if you get a hand right and you solve it, it won't just be like, okay, good, got that one right. It'll be like, good, got that one right, but here's like 8 things I didn't consider that I can
that's
add
awesome.
to that.
That's such an insane idea for a book. Like, that's cool.
That is the idea, is just to give someone like a test, but just give them a massive amount of feedback like on their answer, basically, which is why it's so important that we do this format, and like the reader has an attempt at these exercises before reading my analysis, much like in TGM Grinder's Manual, where we did the same thing.
Quick question.
Yeah.
Did you write 100 essays?
I wrote 100 essays, if you can call them that. Some of the ones near the end, I've already covered like a lot of the theory previously, so they're a little bit shorter, but there is no hand that's just like a couple of paragraphs. Like everything is at least like, 6 or 7 paragraphs minimum, and a lot of them are like 16 paragraphs of text and stuff like that. So there's a lot of words. I haven't word counted this yet, but there is a lot of words in this book. It's all words.
And the second question, at any point did you become jaded or disillusioned with the hand histories you had to read?
Yes. Like after about 8 hands. But I didn't let it show. That's the important thing. Man. I did like 92 hands where I was like really sick of doing this because I enjoy poker a lot, and when I'm in the right mood I enjoy writing. Things I like about writing are writing, how to put this, like in an articulate way and being eloquent and using metaphor and being a bit creative with it. That's what I like about writing. And if I was in a hand where I could do that, like this one, I quite enjoyed it, but a lot of the hands were a little bit dry and they were very technical. And when I was just bashing out technical analysis, I mean, I was making sure I did it to high standard, and that's draining, because you're not getting any stimulation from it. You're basically just being drained by the writing, by the activity. And I think it's normal for anyone to feel a bit just kind of used and drained after you've done that, and a bit deflated, and then you just have to pick yourself up again and do it the next day because you're writing a book and you don't have a choice and you've committed to this. So it's a slog for sure, but it's well worth it at the end of the day.
I'm sure like every student probably can relate to that studies and like crunches on Aqualab or whatever they use, and it's just like, this is the fun part, but you have to do it, and you're exhausted after like 3 hours trying to like compare ranges and stuff like that. But
it really pays, that kind of analysis, and it also pays like when you write a book, because you've managed to create what was it. You had this idea in your head and you knew it would take ages to bring it to like reality, but once you've done that and it actually exists. Like I remember when Grinder's Manual came out, and I was getting all this great feedback and people were like, oh, thank you so much for this book, it's like saved my game. And I just thought like it was all worth it. Like all those nights of like sitting up till 2 a.m. editing that book and stuff, it made it all worth it. And I'm sure 100 hands, I hope it goes down as well as TGM, and hopefully I'll feel that same kind of sense of like, I've achieved something good here, hopefully, yeah.
Yeah, the Grinder's Manual is great. For some secondhand praise for yourself, 2+2 hates almost everything and everyone, and 2+2 even praises it. So you got the forum nerds on your back. Yeah,
no, I was really happy about that actually, that I got a thread on 2+2 and that it actually got like really good praise there. And that is like, 2+2 is like the hell pit of poker, where if you toss something that's not that good, it will get like torn up by like flaming hyenas. And the fact that they were very positive about the Grinder's Manual definitely made me feel like, I was really grateful for that. I was really grateful as well that thread stayed on there and people could gain awareness of the book and all that kind of thing. I think it really helped with the popularity, and I'll be hoping to do the same thing. Hopefully someone reviews it on there for me again. Or like does an objective review, of course, like what happened last time. The review that was on there was points of improvement and all that, and I was really grateful for those too. And we'll do the same thing, and hopefully it goes as well. But good question. You do get very jaded at some points, but you have to pick yourself up and just know that, like running long distance, the finish line is there, and you'll get that adrenaline surge of relaxation as soon as you get there, and you're just waiting for that moment. It's a bit like running, That's how I think of it.
Yeah, you're at the euphoric states where you can do a podcast about something that you're finally done with. So.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, I've got a few more hands to write and then some editing to do, and then I'm good. That's why it was not actually a number between 1 and 100. It was a number between 1 and 97, because that's where I've got to now. Or probably 1 and 90 when I gave it to you, yeah. Anyway, we've got another hand to do, so let's pick up with that now. So the other hand was 56, did you say?
Yes.
Hand 56. So this is an orange hand. This is played by me. So obviously it's a hand where I guess we kind of hope that it's played. I only have made like 2 decisions in this hand, so there's not really a whole lot to critique. But the orange
This-
hands are normally played a bit better than the green hands. As you
They
would expect.
are. That was really funny because I didn't, as someone that was reading these hands that he sent to me, he didn't tell me the green ones are students. He didn't tell me the orange ones are him. And what I was gonna say was like, the orange guy seems to know what he's doing. Everything checks off. And then I was like, I don't know what this kid's doing. And I thought they were both you. And I was like, this doesn't make sense to me.
You thought you were
I was
going
like,
to just have to pretend they were good. Like, talk
Yeah.
talk me
I
through
was like,
your
You're
turn
doing a
call.
great job, Pete.
Yeah, no, right. So I'll let you take the lead with this one like you did with the last one. Then.
All right, so this one is a 50 and L hand. We are effective stack. Well, the effective stack in this particular hand is 118 big blinds, or being technical, 118.5 or 118.49. But let's say 118. We're under the gun, 6 max, and we open ace, queen offsuit. The suits are going to matter in this hand. We open ace of diamonds, queen of hearts. There's a fish, I believe, in the cutoff who flats, which we expect. And then there is a reggish looking player, I think a 26-22 with an 8% 3-bet, something like that, who squeezes. We open 3x pre-flop. The fish calls 3x, and the reg is in the big blind, who 3-bets to $8, which amounts to 16 big blinds. In this particular situation, his required fold equity, or REF, is 66%, and our minimum defense frequency is 34%. We need to defend 34% of our range to not allow this reg to take advantage of us. And so we look down at ace queen. I believe we're opening a range of about 144 combos pre-flop here. So I think that this falls into the upper echelon of it. This actually falls into, I think, the the top 36% of our hands, right around there, which kind of like equates to it's completely fine to defend this. Our mandatory minimum defense is 34. This is about 36, so close enough to defend. Whether we flat or 4-bet is another part of our defense, but the fact is it falls into the category of us defending because we might be ahead of the range, and I'll explain why we might be ahead of his range right now.
Okay.
The reg is squeezing here. A reg, us, and if he's a reg and we have 1,700 hands, which we do have on him, I believe it's 1,700 hands, is aware of our existence and we're aware of that reg's existence.
Yep.
So we're opening under the gun, and then a fish calls. Now, obviously, we want this to happen, and the reg knows that we want this to happen. So the reg is going to squeeze here, possibly push us off, which honestly, I don't know how good the reg is if he thinks he's going to push off at our strongest range here, under the gun. But anyways, he squeezes. We're under the gun, and he's trying to get to the fish. Or we can hope that's what he's trying to do.
Yeah, I mean, he's probably linear anyway, like just with the range. Because, I mean, he
That
can
was literally the next sentence I was going to say. He has to be using linear 3-bet range here.
Yeah, because he can call... Well, I'll let the student explain it. When the student's doing a good job, don't interrupt the student. That's my philosophy, so go on.
Okay, so it's really safe to assume that because it's a reg that we have 1,700 hands on, and his stats look pretty good, he's probably going to 3-bet a linear range here because he can push through us and get to the fish. And there's plenty of times, anyone that's played a lot of hands has seen this, the reg 3-bets, we fold, and then he gets the fish. The fish doesn't fold, which would make sense. No, the fish is like, whatever, I'm going to call again, I'm in position. Has a pseudo connector or whatever.
I am a fish, I am going to call again. I played hand 17.
So yeah, he shows up with like 19 suited and like fucking stacks the guy, and you're like, oh, dodge the bullet there. But so we expect the regs to always be. We should be linear 3-betting here when we're squeezing past a reg and a fish with a fish between, and we expected most people to know this in 2017. So it's safe to assume that he's using not a polarized 3-bet, that would make any sense, and a linear 3-bet to have a value to 3-bet a value range that's going to do well against the fish, regardless of position.
Yeah, and also, like, we are going to defend a lot, so he needs hand strength against us too, and all those hands that could be polarized, he can just call them because there's a fish in the pot.
Yes.
Yep, so that all makes sense, right? So pre-flop is good. We have to call ace-queen, I think, like you say. I mean, let's see if I can give you a quote from this hand from pre-flop at this point. Because quoting is fun. I get a weird satisfaction for it. It's like, look, I actually wrote all these essays. I get to, like, show some of it now.
I love how like you're bringing up quotes, and most people quote other people, but you're quoting yourself, which is like pseudo narcissism.
I am like a one-man selling machine. Like I create everything I sell. I don't have any people selling for me, so I have to be. I have to be like that kind of narcissist. It's really the only way. Yeah. I mean, I should start throwing in things like, I mean, this analysis is probably wrong, but this is what I wrote. Just to appear more humble, right? But that wouldn't sell very well. So I guess it's kind of catch-22, right? You have to like look a little bit full of yourself if you're going to promote your own work, sadly. I don't enjoy that side of it, but yeah. Anyway, this is what I wrote. I said hand 56, not 57, right? So this hand is called Planning Ahead. Every hand has a little catchy title because that makes it more cool for the student to read through the book, I hope. So I've said... Yeah, go on.
Oh, I said a tip. I like it.
Yeah, it's good. It gives it a little bit more. That was actually my friend Carl's idea, who works with me on like projects and stuff like that. Because I was just gonna like call everything hand 1, hand 30, because I was like so jaded I didn't even have the imagination to do this.
She's so jaded.
Yeah, and Carl was like, "Do you know what? Like maybe you should give them titles." And when I started giving them titles, I was like, "This feels a bit more alive to me now. Like I can do this. Like I can actually enjoy this more." Like I was always doing it with a load of energy, but like enjoying it, that's so important, like when you're doing something like this. So the titles, man, they helped me as well, just to feel like, oh, this has a theme, you know, it's cool.
It was your artistic expression that you only had like an ounce of every hand.
Exactly. Like I said to you earlier before we started recording, I've not even been playing my guitar at all because I've been writing this book, because it does drain all your kind of expression for sure. Right. So I've written here, it's important, this is a side point that we didn't actually mention yet, but I've said here, I quote myself, "It is important to understand the futility of deploying any kind of 4-bit range here, unless we have some exploitative reason to adopt one." And this is a concept you've probably met before, but the idea here is that you don't want to 4-bit anything when there's a fish in the pot, and when stack-off ranges are going to be so incredibly tight anyway. It just defeats the point.
Right.
You just want to flat with everything here. But some students, beginners, improvers, like they tend to just 4-bit here with hands without really thinking about the consequences. And it's not co-optimal with the best strategy. Like, certainly not in this spot. Like, the best strategy, most optimal strategy here is to call everything. I go into huge detail about the actual nuts and bolts of that. But for now, I guess what I've said is, like, you know, I don't have any kind of 4-bit range, right? So we get to the flop, and now we have a really interesting decision, I think, here. This is super detailed and complex, this part. So I'll let you have a shot at it first, and then I'll give you some feedback and tell you some things that I've written here. So let's talk about the flop now.
Okay, so before we get into that, I think one important thing to know is the fish folds after we call.
Yep.
Which is not what we want
nope.
necessarily. We wanted him in. That was one of the reasons why we're kind of like calling our whole range almost.
Yeah.
So
for what it's worth, though, I wouldn't call my whole range. Like I said here, that I would not be, like, I wouldn't be set mining here because the fish has only got 100
big... I probably did exaggerate. I just looked down at my range and I'm like, yeah, I'm not calling 9-8 suited. I'm not calling, like, 7s here.
I'm not even calling, like, small pairs here because, like, the implied odds are just not very good because we have to call a massive squeeze and the fish is not even 100 BBs. The fish is just about 100 BBs deep. He's not as deep as we are. And we're not actually going to be seeing the flop with the fish all that often when the squeeze is this big. You've got to remember that the fish is actually calling such a wide range pre that he will just have hands that he's just like, no way, I'm not calling that when the reg makes it like 16 big blinds pre-flop, right? He's going to have hands that just cannot stand that size of squeeze. And so we must be careful here we don't overestimate our implied odds too much. So I actually gave a calling range for Hero of 9s plus Ace-Jack suited plus King-Queen suited and Ace-Queen off plus. So it's kind of it's 76 combos. It's fairly snug, actually, for this huge size.
Mine was tighter. It was 58 combos.
Oh, really? Okay.
I guess I'm a nit.
So I'm seeing the flop a bit wider than you are here, but whatever. Yeah. Like, small difference. We'll just... Let's see what you went with.
But I stared at Ace-Jack suited for a long time, man. So
I guess I flatted it because I want, like, suited big playability against... a reg that could be like fairly active, and also it will dominate like suited connectors and suited aces that the fish takes a shot with, so I feel like it's good. But I definitely agree with avoiding things like Ace-Jack off and King-Queen off and stuff like that for sure.
Yeah. Those just have big X's over them on my range here. So we get to the flop, the fish folds, and we are heads up in position against a reg's squeezing range. The flop comes Jack 10-9, 2 spades, 1 club. Relevant to point out what I said at the beginning of hand to know, we don't have either of those suits. We have ace queen offsuit, no spade, no club. The opponent checks out of position to us, and this is where the hand ends. And I'm like, well, if this isn't one of the weirdest spots ever in poker, it's weird because you're sitting on a pseudo monster draw. You have an open-ended straight draw to the nuts, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have a free card sitting at you just right in your lap.
Yep.
And then you have an opponent's range that you assume is linear, and that, as for all intents and purposes, we should hit this board, but so should he pretty hard.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe in some ways, it's so close. I think that his whole entire range should hit this exact board that he's linear 3-betting the fish.
Yep.
With that being said, then it gets to semantics of how good is this reg? Really, because he just checked, and from my experience with the regs that I play against, they usually just check things like top set in spots like this. And that's definitely not a thing that we should assume for all regs. I'm just saying.
I think they will have quite a high check raise frequency in a spot like this, because I mean they do have to check like super often here in theory if they know what they're doing, right?
If they know what they're doing, but like I don't think that the regs necessarily don't know what they're doing.
No, I mean that's always the point. There's always a huge gap between like the way you might imagine your opponents think if you're kind of demonizing them as like these horrible villains who are going to like beat you, and then the way that they actually think they're just like cats walking across keyboards, like landing on certain keys and causing actions to happen. That's like often closer to the truth. I exaggerate slightly, but yeah.
So yeah, there's so many times where you're like, this guy's totally solid, and he just does something that's completely unbalanced, and you're just like, wait a minute, and then you just realize, oh, you're not a lag, you're just an aggro fish.
Absolutely.
I labeled you wrong.
Yeah, that's so true.
So in this situation, it's kind of interesting because we have a decent amount of pot equity. I don't know how I feel necessarily about our pairs. If we're gonna take a free card and rip those pairs, the queen doesn't feel good, so it's not like the queen's a pair draw. The ace, in some regards, could be fine. And the straight draws, well, they're the nuts, but there's the backdoor flush draw for one of them and the front door flush draw for the other. It's a weird spot because if the opponent knows that we have some sort of range advantage here, we're the reg calling here. We've got to be pretty strong.
I think we have an advantage here. Like I think we do, because the things he's squeezing, the difference here is that he can have hands in his range that are actually relatively weak on this texture, like ace jack off or something like that, whereas we're just not going to show up with that hand. Okay, maybe he can have king queen off as well, and we can't, which sucks, because that's obviously the nuts. But it's weird. I think ranges are like super close, to be honest. Like we both have. He may actually call with like 9s and 10s though. That's the thing. He may not have those, whereas we always do. So I think we must have like a slight advantage, maybe, but it's really tough to say. It depends on how he's actually playing his range.
Well, one of the things that was different with you said you had about 76 or 78 combos, and I had 58 combos. So when I was looking at this flop, I was thinking I'm a little stronger actually against this linear 3-bet squeeze.
Yeah, because you don't have like ace queen off or whatever. Oh no, you do have ace queen off. I guess
I do have ace queen off.
So you don't have what? You don't have like king queen or ace jack suited?
Yeah, I don't have those. So.
Right, okay. Yeah. And you must not have like 9s either then, right?
No, 10. It goes down to 10s.
Right, okay. So those are the differences in our ranges. I'm using 9s plus and I'm throwing in those suited broadways. Okay, so the question is, let's get to the heart of this, like the real meat of this then. So villain should be checking let's approach this in GTO first, right? So villain should be checking like really frequently. We have loads of hands like ace king or like an overpair or something like that have like ace king has nutted out. It doesn't really want to bet all that often at all. We have like ace queen, which also like betting and getting raised seems like kind of gross. I don't really like betting the hand in front of me purely from a vacuum perspective, because saying no to that free card that you said is like literally falling into our lap just seems almost criminal. Like if we bet and get shoved on here, like how much do we hate ourselves for betting that ace queen?
You immediately feel regret, and before you even bet, you feel, God, if this guy check raises me. And that's not a spot where I feel confident that that's the right answer. You know, if you feel these ranges are close, if you feel like this isn't one of those check fold where I'm gonna use some of my pot equity plus fold equity and like be aggressive like that standard equation, and you don't feel confident about that, then I'm an advocate of taking these free cards in those cool spots.
For what it's worth, the conclusion of this hand is the coach's line, hero checks, right? That is the solution. So I do agree with the check here. But I think it's really interesting to see like how we actually flesh out our whole strategy here. I'll tell you what I've gone for. I think we're on the same page, right? But what I've gone for is I've said, now onto the flop, and as always, it helps massively that I'm aware of the range with which I arrive there. Now that's a key point. If you don't know what your range is pre, how the hell are you going to play this kind of spot? Because this is a balancing spot where you really need to know what's going on to figure out how to play different parts of your range optimally. So I've said villain should be checking all of the time, in theory. Whether that's actually true or not, or whether he does, is a bit debatable, but it certainly would be reasonable for villain to like range check here, I think. Like it would be fine and go for a lot of check raises with this stack to pot ratio. Check raise is a great way for him to invest money with king, queen, or a set, obviously, and he could have some high EV draws, high equity draws that want to take the same kind of line. I've then said, this is a board that smashed my more concentrated range. I'm kind of assuming that I have 9s and 10s more than he does when I say that. Hopefully you guys can detect my quoting tone and my non-quoting tone here, because I'm kind of switching. Is that clear enough? Probably not.
Now that you've said it, it seems like it's distinguished.
There is a difference, right? There is a difference. So when I quote, I say things like, note that many regs will just be flatting the likes of 9-9
you do have this narrative tone.
And 10-10 to my open, eager to cash in on their implied odds. Once upon a time, blah, blah, blah. Whereas when just now I'm like speaking in my normal tone, right? So this is what I'm saying. I'm saying like they will be flatting 9s and 10s pre, whereas I won't. Then I've just noted, I've said, well, one problem is that king, queen off is more likely to be in his range than mine. It makes a nice double blocker bluff versus an under the gun opening range, and will do okay against the fish on this weaker table. So that's just what I've said before, really. But then I've gone on to say that I too need to check here when holding an overpair. Like villain needs to check his overpairs. I also need to check here when I'm holding an overpair. I quote, the hand is just not strong enough nor good frequently enough for me to protect my equity. And that's a key point. Protecting equity is a garbage notion in a spot where betting carries with it an enormous downside, right? So the idea of protecting equity here is kind of nonsense. It's not really at the forefront of our decision-making process. We should be more inclined to like protect ourselves from not getting raised here. Because we're going to get raised on a soaking wet board a lot from an out-of-position checking competent reg, for sure.
Right.
I've then said, I will bet here sometimes, but it will typically be with a hand that does not mind bet folding, which is not ace-queen because that hates it, or a hand that is good enough to bet and then get it in. My betting range will be very polarized. Now we can flesh out the strategy in detail. Here goes. Unordered list. List point 1. I'm writing this in HTML, so this is like what it looks like to me. So point 1 on my list is I will value bet 9s through jacks, so all the sets, and king queen suited. 13 combos, that's it. I will bluff with ace king. 16. I've gone for this because it blocks the top of villain's overpairs and does not mind life if it gets raised because its equity was fairly poor anyway. Drawing to like an ace or a king, not a big deal. A queen would be great, but it's only a few outs. It's blocked by his range. So I've gone with ace king there as like my bluffs, basically. You could shave a few of those away, I guess. I've then said I'll check back the rest and continue on most turn cards at least to one bet, as you would if you're going to like play against a lead of like, 2/3 pot. You would be trying to continue more than half of the time to be balanced there, so that's normal.
You bet ace king of spades there? The whole range of the ace kings that you have?
Yeah, ace king of spades is fine because it doesn't have to fold in the face of
it doesn't have to fold.
raise.
Okay, so it just falls with the grouping of the jacks and tens and nines.
Exactly. I mean, it's not as good as those, but it's definitely a hand that I'm really, really happy like betting and then following through with on the turn and stuff like that as well. I'll follow through some ace king on the turn as well because I'm super polarized and I have to.
Right.
So the reason that we're violating the usual rule of bluffing with less showdown value, see how I'm doing that there? Because I'm checking ace queen and I'm actually betting ace king on this jack 10-9. So I'm very much violating that rule, right? That the lowest showdown value hands come first. And I quote, this is because we expect to be raised a significant amount of the time on this texture, where a villain could check very often, i.e. check good hands. So we'd rather bet fold ace king than ace queen. So it just comes down to that again, where we just really don't want to bet fold ace queen. So it's better to realize the free card with that. And then the conclusion is that hero checks. So we have to check back. I think the EV of checking is another way to just see this is the EV of checking is so incredibly high that betting would have to be amazing in comparison. It's just not, because it surrenders equity and throws away dead money at the same time. What do you think?
I would agree. I would think that in this situation, villain is gonna call more than he's gonna fold, which makes me think I really don't want to like forfeit equity there. I didn't think about the ace king, using the ace king combinatorically with my jack. Well, I didn't have nines and tens at the time, so when I was trying to balance out that bet, it was a lot harder for me.
Yeah, so you can't bet all your ace king or you're like a maniac because you don't have tens or nines in your range in the first place. So that makes sense. Yeah.
And so what ended up happening in this spot when I was looking at it, when I had ace king, right, I was like, okay, I want to check back ace queen. Ace king doesn't really do much for me checking back, and I don't want to just never bet here.
Yeah.
And so then it got confusing because then I was trying to like balance out, and I was just like, oh, I'm over bluffing in a spot where like this guy is going to check raise and check call, and I'm not going to listen all the folds of the world. And I was like, I don't have enough things to value bet here. So it ended up being a disaster for me because of how snug my range was.
Yeah, and then you have to you have to split your ace king in that case, right? Like that's the only solution.
Yeah. And that was like weird because it's like, oh, now I have to remember, okay, when the diamond is the ace.
That's not
like so. And I actually organized some of my ranges with like the suits like that, just like to balance it out. But it's definitely a headache.
Yeah, that's always the problem, I think, as well, is that when you try to solve something like a computer, like an engine, like completely optimally, you end up having to make all these weird, inhuman splits that just feel like so counterintuitive and unnatural to ever think at the table. And that's why, humans and solvers are not like one and the same thing, and we shouldn't just blindly copy them, because we can't. But we can, to an extent, like just recognize something like in game, for example, here, I might genuinely in game think, I need to bet some of my ace king. And then that thought will like make me bet or not bet. And hopefully there's some frequency to that. But it's certainly not, I'm going to bet exactly this range. There's no time for that.
When I was younger, one of the things that I used to do, like a battery poker player, when I used to think like, oh, you need to balance or something like that, right? I would have all these like pseudo science ways of approaching that division. So like it would be like, oh, you look at your watch and if it's like this time, you know, like, or what was another thing that I used to do? It wasn't with suits, which just makes sense. I don't know why I had all these like weird things.
But suits creates a weird abstract problem as well, in that like hypothetically you could be in a spot where you just never ever have like the ace of spades, even though that becomes like the key blocker card on the river because the randomizer told you never to have it, right? So like that doesn't work either. Like no engine would ever use suits. It would use just percentages of the time and use its random number generator to do that.
I do try to look at flop textures and then just flip them for like a texture where I'm like, oh, I have the back door here, so just like flip the suits you were going to use. But I always make it like 2 of something and 2 of something. It's the best I can do with not being a robot, man.
Yeah, and it doesn't matter that much. Like in the real world, like it's fun to get carried away in this kind of analysis, but in the real world, like who is going to know exactly what your range is? Does it actually matter? If I'm betting slightly too many ace king here or slightly too few, I don't think so, to be honest. Like it's such a rare spot. It's not like Villain's going to go away and be like, characters uses 3 too many ace king combos on this flop as a check raise or as a bet. It's just
what an idiot.
I'm not worried about it at all. I'm just like trying to like theoretically come up with the best plan because it's interesting. I think if you just check ace queen and bet ace king here, you'll be doing fine in practice. Like in Poker Trackers EV, like you'll be doing okay.
Just to roast myself, you were casually like, I don't care, man. I'll have 3 extra combos. Meanwhile, I time bank and say, man, fucking combos should I use here? Like, I'm such a perfectionist that, like, I actually, like, overanalyze and waste mental energy on that. So anyone that listens, don't be me. Be him. Don't fucking waste energy on that.
I don't know. I think it's good, though, that you've got that enthusiasm to sit there and try and get it right. Like, I mean, I think if you were playing professionally, like, the argument would be you've just, like, got less hands an hour every time you do that, and you need to move along with a zoom pool and fast folds, you can, or whatever, and get the hand done so you can get onto another hand, because the more you work, the more money you make. But when you're playing and you're still learning the game, and you're doing it because you are, like, fascinated, you're, like, geekily fascinated with this hobby, I'm all for that, and I've done that with many of the things I'm fascinated with. We're all kind of obsessive as poker players if we take the game this seriously, and that's part of our character. That sometimes we have to rein it in, and sometimes we can just indulge in it. I think,
Yeah, a lot of people, like, for the reasons why people play, is for me, it's just like neurotic, like statistical analysis. Money's cool, but there's a part of it that I actually like enjoy, where like you get to the nitty gritty part of the numbers, and it just seems fascinating.
Yeah, that's cute. I mean, I remember when I felt that way.
That's cute. I remember when I used to give a shit and care.
Yeah, exactly. It's like a grumpy old man, right? Like, I do still care. It's just, like, when you do the same analysis, like, say I coach, like, 5 players a day or something, right? It should be, like, a busy coaching day for me. But if I do that and I've happened to explain the same concept, like, 4 times that day, I'm just like, I never want to see that concept again. Like, if anyone else shows me another spot where, like, I need to protect my turn range with a small bet by betting really often, I'm going to just, like, quit this job or whatever. I never quit this job because it's great. And, like, let's face it, we got into this because we loved it in the first place, and you will always love poker, that's the thing. You just have to mix it up. I think that's the thing. When you're studying the game, like, if you're, like, a student listening to this and you're studying the game a lot, don't do 100 of the same batch exercise, or you will, like, demoralize yourself. You will become jaded. Like, definitely do mix it up, make it fun, time yourself, work with friends, like, do sweats. The reason I loved studying poker back in the day, when I was still coming up the ranks, and that was that I worked with a lot of poker friends on Skype all the time. Never saw my girlfriend at the time. That's probably why we split up, right? But it was mainly just sitting and chatting with other nerdy poker guys and just loving it and just, like, having a beer and playing a session. And that's what I wanted to do when I came home from work, you know? So that's it. Just be social about it, mix it up, and don't just slog through the details, because you will get fed up, I think. Anything else you want to talk about on this hand, or anything that's come up from the podcast before we wrap it up?
Think about this hand. It was insightful. I was interested to hear what was the correct thing to do, because I was not as confident as I was about the abysmal green hand.
Yeah.
This one, honestly, and it probably, if anyone listening would probably hear that there's a lot more uncertainty. Like, my confidence in this hand versus the other hand is lower by a considerable margin. And so when I face this flop, this is definitely one of those spots where I'm just like, and I have to, like, kind of time bank think. It isn't as like, oh, this is clearly, like, the right thing to do.
Yeah, for sure.
So I feel like I just got a little free coaching on that. So next time I end up in opening a straight draw with ace queen, I know, oh man, I'm going to check this back and not accidentally click bet.
Yeah, when it happens to be in a huge squeezed pot against a possibly uncapped checking range. I mean, this spot, like you said at the start, is just so weird. Like, how often are we even going to see this spot? Like, it's just a bizarre kind of deformity of a poker spot. Yeah, it's strange.
These are not... one thing is, when I looked at both spots, I looked at one of the things I thought driving home today. I was thinking about the ace queen hand and the ace 7 hand. I said, I wouldn't even. When I talked to Pete today about the ace queen hand, I'm sure I'll learn something. But I feel like the ace 7 hand is what's more important, because it's like, this is the hand you play every session, every second, you know. Yeah. And the and one of the things I always say is, like, I don't care about a 6-bet pot or what to do in, like, this 4-bet pot or 5-bet pot, because like, that never happens, you know? Well, lately, against some of the regs, I've been in, like, a freaking 3-bet, 4-bet, 5-bet reg war. But besides that, I mean, you're going to just be opening a small blind and being heads up out of position, and you got to play those right, because those are the things that matter the most.
For sure. But I think it's also about, like, extrapolating. So, like, when the student reads this analysis of hand 57, they aren't just going to learn, here's me, like, scuttling to, like, defend why I did a rare spot, right? I guess what I'm trying to say is, like, they're not just going to learn, like, okay, this one happened to be a check back, but hopefully they're going to learn, like, protection doesn't work in spots like this, or you shouldn't have a 4-bet range in this common pre-flop spot. I think there's a lot in a lot of these essays about these hands where the one, like, decision point might be really rare and kind of quirky like that, but then there's all these lessons that can be generalized from it, which is the cool thing about doing a rare spot every now and then. But I totally agree. I think doing common spots is so much more valuable in general, for sure.
Well, I would want to say one thing about that. I actually ended up texting a piece of this hand. I just sent it to a friend that's recreational, right? Mm-hmm. I just said, what would you do? I didn't give him the whole hand. I just said, you open under the gun, 50-0, fish calls, reg, you know he's a probably decent reg, 3-bets you, right? Mm-hmm. And what do you do what do you do with ace queen here, right? Yep. And his response, he never considered there's a fish right there. Yep. And I was just like, and in the end, I think he just decided the 4-bet.
Gross.
But yeah, I was like, no, bro. I didn't tell him anything. I was just like, he'll hear this and, like, it'll be interesting.
He listens to the Carrot Poker podcast.
Huh?
Does he listen to the podcast?
No, I don't think he's aware of it. I was going to show it to him.
That's good.
He barely plays. He's got, like, a family and all that stuff. But we talk poker every once in a while.
That's good.
But But one of the things was, it was just interesting. A takeaway is that I think a lot of people, they might look at this and they'll see they have 3-bet, they'll bet 3-bet, they'll look at ace queen and they'll say, oh, what am I supposed to call? Am I supposed to 4-bet? And they'll start thinking about all the things I said at the beginning of the hand. What's his RFE? What's my MDF? And then they keep forgetting there's this fish right there. And that's probably one of the, like, there's things that people aren't like focusing on that might be some of the most important parts of the hand. And they get too swept up in like some analytical point.
It's a great point, yeah. I mean, that happens all the time where someone, the classic example is like a student that you were really proud of, that you thought was doing really well, like a kind of blank slate student, you know? So someone that's not picked up loads of bad habits and hasn't read terrible books or been stuck in 2005 with some bad coach or whatever. Like, I mean, a blank slate that you've got your hands on, you've taught him to be really good, and then, like, he goes away one week and he, like, watches a video about using Pile Solver to, like, build complete tripling strategies for, like, some spot. And then you come back and he's misapplied it so abhorrently, like, so terribly, and he's just, like, making all these awful plays against fish. And you're just like, how has this happened? Like, this is a disaster. And it happens all the time.
Done in 6 days since we last spoke.
Yeah, you got to be careful, like, what you take in poker, right? Like, it's a separate point. You have to be very careful how, like, to streamline your learning in a decent, specific way. You can't just go off in all directions, right?
Let me just roast myself in this regard. This weekend, actually, I'm currently working on C-Bet theory with you. Mm-hmm. And so I ended up on Reddit once and like watching some Reddit at once videos where they do like Peel Solver. And at the end of watching like a 3-part series, I said, yo, just flush that right into your brain. Because you don't use Peel Solver. This is over complex. If you try to apply this, you're just going to fuck it up. I was like, chill the fuck out and just go to your homework and just do some like quick hand history reviews and just think critically on your own stuff. And in the end, I had a Runner-Up accounts that I signed up for just to watch these videos. And I just was like, I'm going to unsubscribe. This was like, I shouldn't have did this. This is like, I don't think you should ever make any of these things too convoluted. Like you said, streamlined, you know?
Yeah.
Right now we're working on C-Bet theory. We just worked on big blind defense and stealing from the small blind. And I looked at the goals that we have listed, and Pete says he does with all his students. He writes out goals once he looks at your database when you first meet up.
Yep.
And I looked at my goals, and I saw big blind defense, loosen up your 3-bet, C-Bet theory, and something else I can't remember. And I was like, why am I stressing this so much if we're like on a nice trajectory right now? You know, I feel the improvements. I feel like I have a grasp of the concepts that you're applying, teaching me, and I'm applying them. Why am I going to go take this freaking solve GTO Peel Solver? I don't even have Peel Solver. Like, what are you doing, kid? You know?
Yep.
And so, don't drive yourself crazy with a bunch of misinformation in the sea of the internet.
Yeah, you have to be very careful, like, because your game is a fragile little baby when you first like learn
little
poker.
Baby.
Yeah, and you are responsible for nurturing that. And if you just fill it full of all these crazy ideas at once, it goes insane, and it's like mental. And I'm picturing a crazy analogy right now about parents that raised a child by like overloading it with information and it going to school and like being a psycho.
I almost homeschooled myself. That's what I did this weekend. I almost homeschooled myself, and I went crazy, man. I went crazy. Thank you. Also, I would like to thank the forums because some people helped me out with a couple of things that actually increased my win rate against a specific Greg this week. That was awesome.
Oh, on the Carrot Corner forum, yeah, cool.
Yeah. Someone gave me a bunch of helpful information. There were some spots where I was second guessing myself, and they point out something I didn't see, almost like, hey, there's a fish right to your left. What are you doing? It was something like that. I was completely overlooking, like, oh, of course, you know. There's that epiphany, like, how did I not see this?
The great thing about the Carrot Corner forum, right, which is the forum that when you're my student, you buy a coaching package, you get automatic entry to. Or if you just want to join it, you can send me the once-off join fee to become a part of the forum. It's not very much. Just email me admin@carrotcorner.com if you want to read into that. But the majority of people on there are my students, as you know, Jack. And the good thing about it that I think separates it from every other poker place in the forum is that if you go down every thread, you will find 0 examples of someone going lol fold. Like, it just doesn't happen. You won't see.
That never happens. Literally.
OMG
I learned
call
for a while, and I know this is a part of the podcast that feels like as if we're now I'm selling you something, but we like had 6 takes on this. No, we didn't have 6 takes on this podcast, but we never even talked about this.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I just
But
wanted to
no,
point
that's
that
really
out, though.
true. I learned for a while. I never saw any trollage. I never saw any like dismissive,
Yeah.
disrespectful answers. And there was a time where I was wording something, a response to someone, and I was like, oh man, you have to be really careful. Everyone's so nice in this forum. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but
And
it just
the internet can bring out the worst in people,
Right.
and somehow this is like a safe haven.
That's what I wanted it to be when I set it up. So the few guys I had at the time, like my stronger students, like in 2014 or 2015, whenever it was, I set this forum up. I was kind of like, right, we all agreed together. We said, right, we want this to be a safe haven. We want this to be a place where people are respectful, and you speak to someone on this forum like you're speaking to them in real life, because 99% of trolls or whatever on 2+2 are major. I'm not saying it's 2+2's fault. It's just that massive forums attract massive amounts of people, and in doing so, you get trolls, right? You get people who are just like horrible, and 99% of them would not be like that in the real world. Like, I'm sure of it. They'd be like pleasant
Absolutely,
enough. It's just a weird online thing. Like, we didn't evolve with the internet, so we didn't evolve to be nice to people. We didn't evolve like the same social kind of graces that we have in real life, because the internet was not part of that evolutionary history. That's probably all it is. But I thought, we thought when we were setting up the group, like, why can't we bring the social norms of the real world to this part of the internet and have people who are walking into this like really intimidating new zone where they're faced with this massive game that's just so overly complicated and intimidating? Why can't we just make them feel like okay about themselves rather than just being like, you suck? Because like when I first started learning, I was part of a community called Flop Turn River, and a lot of great people on there. I met a really bunch of good friends on there, like back in like 2009 or whatever. But there would always be days when you'd post something and someone would come on and be like, this is terrible. What the hell are you doing? And at first it made me really mad. Like it actually held me back, I would say, by like a year, just how bad people were to me. And not personally, not like I'm the victim. Like, everyone gets this. But how bad that was for like the first year, because I had an ego problem, right? And people were like so rude that I just felt like defensive immediately. And I was immature. I was like 20 years old, and I felt like immediately defensive, like I had to justify myself, and I couldn't accept that I was making mistakes because I was being made to feel really bad about making mistakes. That doesn't work, right? Like, shouting at someone doesn't give you better results with that person. It doesn't cause them to improve their behavior. Just like being horrible to people in forums doesn't help either. So I guess the idea was, maybe people don't have to waste like 9 months being defensive and having a huge ego if we can just be nice to them and let them see that they're playing terribly by not being dicks to them. And that was the idea. And then I can write like in 100 hands, the student's a moron, and then delete it, and then it's out of my system, right? And I can keep that away from my forum.
It's all in you. It's all in you. You're
Exactly.
Like, every time that you look at a hand and you just think you know what's right, and you see them do something wrong, your immediate, like, I'm 27. My initial mental response is, that's stupid, but like, don't say that, like, don't be a dick. But people like go from that mental thought.
Yes.
Then they sign in, like they log in, then they click comment, then they type it, and then they cope, and then they post. And it's like, there's a lot of things that happen between that mentally and all that mouse and clicking. And I'm like, how could you do that? You're a terrible person.
No, for sure. It's the same with driving, like, where you get people who I'm sure would be very nice to you. If you like imagine this scenario, right? Like, you go to the petrol station or gas station, if you're American, and you open the door and you don't look where you're going and you accidentally just bump into someone, right? I bet they would be like, you'd be like, oh, I'm sorry. And they would say, no, don't worry about it, right? And that same guy, like 2 minutes later, you could like accidentally almost cut him off or something when he's leaving the junction, and he'll shout and scream at you and like give you the finger and swear at you. And that's the same guy. It's the same thing that just happened. It's just one is driving and one is walking about. Now, is it that he doesn't want to get in a fight with you, and he knows that could happen when you're actually walking around and physically bumping into each other, and he's afraid of that? No, I don't think it's that. I think it's just he's not evolved a mechanism while driving to avoid confrontation, but he has in normal life because he doesn't want to get like clubbed over the head. That's all it is.
Right.
And if we can just rein that in the poker world, like, we can make people better. And if you're in poker education, that's your goal. If you're like a poker player, I'm probably hurting you by like creating this environment, or we are. But that's our idea, is we're trying to be like, just cut that out and just say like, this is online, but that doesn't mean that we can just like forget all our social kind of coping processes that we use to get along with people in real life.
Because unfortunately, poker and etiquette are not like synonymous,
No.
So.
No, it's weird. And I play a lot of bridge these days. That's like my passion, like I said to you before, I'm sure.
Yo, man, I looked up a video of bridge. I looked up multiple video of bridges. You need to make some bridge content, man, because the quality content out there, like, there's a market to capitalize on. Like, a deuce's crack for bridge or something, man, because this is abysmal. Like, there was some old British lady explaining to me, which is not too far from you in range, relatively speaking. But I was like, man, I don't know what's going on. I tried as soon as you told me you're playing bridge, and I was like, what is this game? What is this like? It seems like there's an edge to be had and someone to be beat. And I was like, yo,
oh, it's such a good game. It really is.
I know you're going to like retirement homes and freaking grinding out like inheritances and shit. You're like, yo, put your pink slip and your will on the line, bro.
Yeah, I mean, they don't play for money as such, but I mean, there's competition money to be won and stuff. But like, I think the problem with the bridge world is more, without going on too much of a digression, it's just that it's mostly older people who aren't up to scratch with like technology and posting on YouTube. If we could get more younger people into bridge, we could fix that problem. We could make it way more accessible for other younger people. But there's an alienation there in that one generation haven't passed down the game very well. Like the previous generations have not had the best attitude to spreading the game through the younger generations, and now there's all these kind of, you know, stigma about bridge just for people in retirement homes or whatever. It's actually one of the most like mentally challenging games out there. It's ridiculously complicated and it fascinates me utterly because of that. But that's a podcast for another day. But if you enjoy poker, bridge is also for you, but doing both at once is maybe a bit overkill. But when you get older and you want to like play a game that's not for money and have a lot of fun with it, bridge is like definitely like the competitive strategy game I would recommend, like card game. But yeah, where was I going before that? I was saying, yeah, like in bridge, like etiquette is a big thing, and people are so nice generally and really polite, but when they play with their spouse, and I play with my girlfriend, and we sometimes have like little fights and stuff, like it all goes to hell. And again, like the social rules disintegrate. If I'm playing with a weaker player who I don't know very well, I'm not going to give them a hard time about playing bad. I might point something out to them, like, oh, you should really return a diamond there because blah, blah, blah. It might be better, but I wouldn't say, like, why did you play a spade? Like, how could you possibly play a spade when blah, blah, blah? Right. But I will say that to my girlfriend, and I'll stop and I'll think, why am I speaking to her like that? I'm supposed to, like, love this person more than any of the other people in this room, yet I'm so much nicer to them than I am to her. Like, how the hell does that work? It should at least be neutral, right? Like, it's so fucked up when you think about it in that sense. The same in poker.
I'm a very competitive person, and my ex-girlfriend, we like would play like game nights, and like we would either crush or we'd lose against like a really solid couple, you know. And like I remember like car rides where we'd like lose, you know, and I'd just like, how could you think that, like, you know, like question like all these like these leaks and stuff like that, you know, how we play like cranium, you know, and like I wouldn't even want to sleep in the same bed. I just like we get home like you both are like depressed and tired, and I just like stay up watching like a late night show. She goes to bed. She's like, "You coming to bed?" I'm like, "No, I'm gonna stay up a little longer."
Oh God, yeah, it's bad. Yeah, we as humans like we have to be so careful that we don't just like succumb to our own kind of horrible instincts in some situations, and it makes you such a bad poker player if you can't control that side of you. Like just to make this relevant again. Because like your ego is your biggest enemy, like for sure, and it held me back by like a year. If I could have just got over that at the time, I'd have saved like so much time. But anyway, like let's wrap up because we were going to do coaching, which obviously isn't going to happen now that we've made this podcast go on for so long. But that's fine. It's been awesome having you on, and I've really enjoyed the conversation. And really good job on the hands and talking about those. It was good, instructive for the listeners, I hope. So just to give you guys a quick update. I'm currently like 3 days away from having written everything in the book. Just got the introduction to write, a couple more hands to write, then it's editing, and then it's going to be out. So I really hope by the end of the month it should be ready. It should be like on the virtual shelves of my website, carrotcorner.com, 100 hands tab, for you to go and buy it. And you can just buy it like straight away using like a credit, debit card, PayPal, whatever. Through a secure platform from the site. So I hope you guys can just get it as soon as possible. And I'll be making a podcast as soon as it's out. Please subscribe on YouTube if that's where you're listening, or on iTunes or whatever, because as soon as the book is out, if you're like waiting for this, and I hope that you are, then I can actually say it's there now, guys, and you can get it without like having to check like 2 days later or whatnot. It's just better, right? So Jack, anything else do you want to talk about, or should we wrap up and have you back on the show in the near future, I think?
Sure, that'd be great. No, I don't have anything else to add.
Awesome. Cool. Well, I'll get you back on again, like in a few weeks or a month or whatever, because that was fun, and we'll maybe get some new topics. Maybe you guys can send in as well if you're listening on YouTube or whatever. Just leave in the comments like what you might want me to talk about with someone next time I have a guest on, and I can do that because I quite like you said to me earlier, Jack. Like the non-poker content is sometimes like necessary to break up all the like to be entertaining and break up all this kind of hard theory. So that's important too. So what non-poker topics or semi-related poker topics would you like me to talk about? I might do a series that's like poker but not poker in the near future as well after the book's been fully done and promoted. So anyway, guys, thank you very much again. Leave me questions, comments, and I will be back in a week's time as promised with the next episode of this podcast. Thanks for watching.